My wife ended our 15-year marriage with a PDF attachment, while I was deployed off the coast of Yemen, under constant Red Sea missile threats. 15 years of deployments and homecomings, erased in a single email. My name is Michael Briggs, 44 years old, a staff sergeant with the 101st Airborne Division. I'd been out there for 6 months when Sarah decided she was done waiting. The subject line read, "Let's be adults about this." A cold, corporate phrase for dismantling a life. The message itself was 3 clinical sentences. She'd already filed the paperwork in Denver. She'd already emptied our joint checking and savings accounts. She'd already moved her new boyfriend, a man named Kevin, into our house, the one I'd put the down payment on with my re-enlistment bonus. I read the email twice, the words blurring against the screen's harsh glare and the dim light of the comms tent. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the laptop. The click when I closed it felt louder than any gunshot I'd ever heard. I walked to the communal stalls, the grit of the desert floor crunching under my boots, and took a long shower, letting the tepid water wash away nothing at all. Then I got dressed for my patrol shift and said nothing to anyone. When I got back to my bunk that night, the exhaustion bone deep, I replied with a single word. Understood. That was it. No argument, no begging, no threats. In my world, you assess a situation, you accept the facts on the ground, and you plan your next move. Emotion is a luxury you can't afford when the stakes are high. My bunkmate, Carter, a good kid from Ohio on his first tour, noticed something was off. "You good, man?" he asked, not looking up from the paperback he was reading. "Yeah," I said, my voice flat. "Just some stuff back home." He nodded, a silent acknowledgement that stuff back home was a Pandora's box no one wanted to open for another man. Military guys know when to leave things alone. The truth was, I wasn't surprised. For a split second, I wondered if I had driven her away, if years in the army had turned me into a stranger in my own home. I was hurt, profoundly so, but not surprised. The months before deployment were a slow unraveling. Sarah stopped asking about my day, came home later and later, and suddenly had new friends, new passwords, and a closet full of expensive gym clothes. I didn't confront her. I didn't start checking her messages or following her around. That's not who I am. My father, a steelworker from Pittsburgh, taught me that a man's character is defined by his actions in the face of uncertainty, not by his accusations. But I wasn't blind. My gut, honed by years of threat assessment, was screaming at me. So, I made some quiet moves of my own. Nothing dramatic, just precautions. A quiet counterinsurgency to protect my own future. I rented a small, climate-controlled storage unit across town. I spent a Saturday afternoon moving important documents there: my birth certificate, our marriage license, the original deed to the house with only my name on it, a benefit of the VA loan I'd secured. My military benefits paperwork, my grandfather's engraved watch, my late mother's old silver tea set. Things that mattered, things that were mine alone. I also opened a separate savings account at a different credit union and started diverting a portion of my pay there. It wasn't enough for her to notice the change in our joint account deposits, but it was enough that I wouldn't be starting from absolute zero if, or when, things went south. The night before I deployed, she gave me a quick, dry-eyed hug at the airport. "Stay safe, okay?" She said like she was seeing off a coworker, not a husband heading into a war zone. Part of me, the part that still remembered the girl I'd fallen for, hoped I was wrong. I wasn't. What she didn't know was that I'd prepared for this moment. And what she didn't understand about me, even after 15 years, was that I never start fights. But I damn well finished them. I met Sarah at a friend's barbecue in 2008. I was home on leave between tours in Iraq, staying with my buddy Mark in Denver. She was vibrant and funny, finishing a degree in social work, though she later ended up in dental administration because it was less emotionally draining, as she put it. We were married 10 months later in a small ceremony at the courthouse. Sarah used to say she was proud of my service, but she never truly grasped it. Her father was an accountant, her brother a software engineer. The concepts of duty, honor, and country were abstract to them, things you saw in movies. More than once, she'd asked when I was going to get a real job, not realizing that after 18 years, the Army was my career, my community, my entire life. It was the only place I ever felt like I truly belonged. We bought our house in 2012, a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet suburb. My name was the only one on the mortgage because the VA loan was in my name, but I'd added her to the deed. That's what married people do. They share things. Or so I thought. My dad died of a heart attack a year after we got married. My mom passed 3 years after that from a rare form of lung cancer, though she never smoked a day in her life. They left me a modest inheritance, enough that Sarah and I could pay off her student loans and still have a comfortable cushion in our savings account. A cushion she had just stolen. I deployed 5 times during our marriage. Iraq twice, and the Middle East 3 times. Each time I came home, Sarah seemed a little more distant, a little more restless, like she was an actress playing a role she'd long since outgrown. I didn't sign up to be a military wife, she told me once, during an argument after I mentioned the possibility of re-enlisting for another 4 years. I'm tired of being alone all the time, Mike. Tired of putting my life on hold. I understood that, I really did. But what could I do? The Army wasn't just a job, it was my identity. I was good at it. People depended on me. In 2022, things started changing more rapidly. She got irritated when I called during her girls' nights. She started talking glowingly about her friend Jessica, who had divorced her husband and was now living her best life. She'd make passive-aggressive comments about how we didn't really have anything in common anymore. I suggested counseling. She said we were fine, just going through a phase. Then came the late nights, the weekends away with friends I'd never been introduced to, the new clothes, the gym membership she rarely used. I should have confronted her, but my training taught me to observe, gather intelligence, and act from a position of strength, not emotion. So I watched, and I prepared. My gut told me a storm was coming. 2 weeks after the divorce email, I was sitting in the mess hall, pushing reconstituted eggs around my plate, when my phone buzzed. A notification from my banking app. Another withdrawal, $9,200. Almost everything that was left. I set my fork down and opened the app. The joint account balance was $31. 18. Our savings account, the one with over $55,000 we built up over years, money from my parents, from my combat pay, was gone. Transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Rodriguez, one of the guys from my unit, glanced over. Bad news, Sarge? I locked my phone, my face a mask of indifference. Nah. Just some account stuff. That night, I used a secure line at the base comm center to call the bank. A polite woman on the other end confirmed my worst fears. Sarah had been moving money for weeks. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. The big transfers, the ones that drained the accounts, started the day after I deployed. I hung up and stood in the sterile hallway for a long time, watching soldiers laughing, calling their kids, their wives, their parents. Normal life, happening all around me, while mine was being systematically dismantled from 7,000 miles away. That's when Carter found me. Heard from Alvarez that you looked like you'd seen a ghost at breakfast, he said, his voice low. What's up? I don't usually share personal stuff, but Carter had pulled me out of a tight spot during a firefight near the Pakistani border a month prior. I trusted him. My wife emptied our accounts and moved her boyfriend into our house, I said, the words tasting like ash. Sent divorce papers while I was on patrol last week. Carter didn't offer the usual platitudes. No. I'm sorry, man. Or, that's rough. He just looked at me, his young face serious, and asked the only question that mattered. What's your plan? Not sure yet, I admitted. He nodded. Let me know if you need anything. That night, sleep was impossible. I pulled out my laptop, half expecting the login not to work anymore. But it did. And what I saw on those cameras made my stomach turn. The cameras showed a strange Ford F-150 in our driveway. A man I'd never seen before, tall, with slicked back hair, was walking our golden retriever, using my favorite coffee mug, wearing my Denver Broncos sweatshirt. And there was Sarah, laughing in the kitchen I'd spent my last leave renovating. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something colder, clearer. A switch had been flipped. I closed the laptop and pulled out my phone. I made a list. 1. Call David, Army buddy, now a lawyer. 2. Check Virginia loan terms, sole ownership clause. 3. Contact Master Sergeant about emergency leave. 4. Review home refinance documents. Sarah mentioned it casually last year. 5. Check security on my military pension accounts. I didn't feel sad anymore. I didn't even feel angry. I felt focused, like I was planning a mission. This wasn't about emotion now. This was about strategy. At 0500 before my shift, I sent an email to David with the subject line: Need legal help. Discreet and urgent. His reply came an hour later. Call me. Secure line only. When I hung up from that call, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to threaten. I didn't even need to confront her. I just needed to wait, watch, and let her own actions become the trap. 2 months later, I was back on American soil. I didn't tell Sarah I was coming home. I took emergency leave, citing a family health crisis, which wasn't entirely a lie. My family was in crisis. I checked into a nondescript motel in downtown Denver under a different name and contacted David. We met at a diner 10 miles outside the city limits. You look like hell, Mike, he said, sliding into the booth. Feel like it too. David handed me a thick folder. Everything we discussed. The house deed, loan documents, bank statements. And this. He pulled out a separate paper. Found something interesting when I was digging into your finances. It was a home equity line of credit application, with my signature on it. Except it wasn't my signature. Not quite. Someone had tried to copy it but missed the details. The middle initial was a sloppy J instead of a crisp T, and the stroke pattern was all wrong. Sarah did this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. David nodded. 3 months ago. Used the equity to pull out $40,000. Your signature is required for that since the VA loan is in your name only. Forge my signature, take out a loan against our house, then clear out our accounts and divorce me, I said, piecing it together. Busy woman. It gets better, David said, a grim set to his jaw. She listed her boyfriend, Kevin, as a co-applicant. He's got a record. 3 DUIs and an embezzlement charge from 2019. I took a long, slow breath. What are my options? Several, David said. But first, you need to decide what you want. I thought about it. The house. The money. The betrayal. I want what's legally mine. And I want her to understand that actions have consequences. David smiled, a thin, predatory smile I remembered from our time in the service. Then here's what we do. The next day, I drove past our house. Kevin's truck was gone, but Sarah's SUV was in the driveway. I parked down the street and watched. I thought about knocking on the door, about the raw, visceral satisfaction of confrontation. But that wasn't the plan. Instead, I drove to the bank. I met with the loan officer who had processed the fraudulent loan, a nervous man named Evans. I showed him my military ID, my driver's license with my real signature, and the forged documents David had obtained. His face went pale. I'll need to report this immediately. I understand, I said calmly. I've already filed a police report. That night I got a text from Sarah. Who have you been talking to at the bank? Kevin said someone was asking questions. I didn't respond. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office and filed the necessary paperwork contesting the loan due to fraud, registering a formal notice that no changes to the property title could be made without my physical presence. 2 days later, Sarah called. I let it go to voicemail. Michael, we need to talk. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can discuss it like adults. Like adults. The same phrase from her email. I still didn't respond. David called that afternoon, his voice charged with energy. They froze the Helix funds, and there's more. Your wife's boyfriend has been driving your truck, right? The one in your name? Yeah. He got pulled over this morning. Driving on a suspended license from those DUIs. They impounded the vehicle. Good, I said. He also had some interesting things in the truck. Prescription pads from the orthodontist's office where Sarah works. They weren't blank. I closed my eyes, a new, sickening layer of deceit revealing itself. She's been stealing prescription pads. Looks that way. The police are investigating. I hung up and sat on the edge of the lumpy motel bed. This was spiraling into something bigger and uglier than I'd ever imagined. Part of me, a foolish, sentimental part, wanted to call Sarah, to warn her. But then I remembered the security camera footage, my house, my dog, my life, given away like it meant nothing. No. This was the path now. I couldn't turn back. And honestly, I didn't want to. The next morning, I met with the bank's fraud investigator. This happens more often than you'd think, he said, spreading documents across his desk. Spouse deploys, other spouse sees an opportunity. What happens now? I asked. We've frozen the funds from the fraudulent loan, but there's a problem. Some of the money's already gone. How much? About half, $18,500. I leaned forward. Where did it go? The investigator hesitated, then turned his computer screen toward me. There were multiple transfers to someone named Ryan Peterson. Who's Ryan Peterson? I asked. I called David as soon as I left the bank. An hour later, he called back. Got it. Ryan Peterson is a real estate agent. Specializes in quick, cash-only sales, often for distressed properties. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She was planning to sell our house. Looks that way. The deposits were probably earnest money to get him moving. But here's where it gets interesting. Peterson has done business with Kevin Ryan before. They've closed 4 deals together in the past 2 years. I sat down on a park bench, the world tilting slightly. This wasn't just Sarah leaving me. This was a planned operation. I did some digging into Kevin, David continued. He has a pattern. Gets involved with women who are either going through a divorce or have a deployed spouse. 4 cases I found. Each time, the woman's home gets sold well below market value to one of Peterson's shell companies. Kevin gets a cut, then he moves on. And Sarah? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Did she know about this? Hard to say. Maybe she's a victim, too. Or maybe she's in on it. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was bigger. Other military families had been victims. What do we do? I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, David said. This crosses state lines, involves military personnel and VA loans. They're very interested. That night, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. Michael, please call me. The bank is saying something about fraud and Kevin got arrested for driving your truck. I don't understand what's happening. I stared at the message, then typed, Who is Ryan Peterson? The 3 dots appeared as she started typing, then stopped. Started again, then stopped. Finally, I don't know what you're talking about. $18,500, I wrote. Multiple transfers. House listing. No response for 10 minutes. Then, it's not what you think. I turned off my phone. The next morning, David called. The FBI wants to meet. They've been investigating Kevin and Peterson for months. You're not the first, but you might be the case that breaks it all open. For the first time since getting that email in Bagram, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because my marriage was over, but because the truth was finally coming out. I met with Agent Morales and Agent Reed at their field office in Denver. They recorded my statement, took copies of all the documents David and I had gathered. Your case helps establish a pattern, Agent Morales explained. It shows intent, organization. It makes it a conspiracy. What about Sarah? I asked. My ex-wife. The agents exchanged a look. We're still determining her level of involvement, Reed said carefully. Did she ever mention financial difficulties? Pressure to sell the house? I thought back. She kept saying we were house poor, that we should downsize. I didn't see the need. Our mortgage was manageable. When did that start? Morales asked. About 8 months ago. Around the time she must have met Kevin. That evening, I drove to our neighborhood again. Kevin's truck was back, out of impound. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. We need to talk. In person. Meet me at Washington Park tomorrow at 10 a.m. I showed the text to David. Don't go, he advised. I won't, I said. But I want to know what she's doing while she thinks I'm meeting her. The next morning, we parked across the street from my house. At 9:45 a.m., Sarah came out, got in her SUV, and drove away, heading toward the park. 20 minutes later, a sleek black sedan pulled up. A man in a suit got out, Ryan Peterson. Kevin came out to greet him. They talked in the driveway, then went inside. Should we follow them? David asked. I shook my head. No need. I pulled out my phone. I installed security cameras last year. Interior and exterior. They upload to cloud storage. David's eyebrows shot up. You didn't mention that before. Never came up. I opened the security app. Peterson and Kevin were in my living room. Peterson was taking photos. I turned up the volume on my phone. Should list by the end of the week. Peterson was saying, I've got a cash buyer already interested. We list at $550,000. They offer $450,000. We take it. Everybody's happy. What about the husband? Kevin asked. Sarah says he's causing trouble with the bank. Peterson waved a dismissive hand. Military guys are all the same. They make a lot of noise, but they've got deployments, responsibilities. He'll take a settlement just to make it go away. I turned to David. He was already recording the feed on his own phone. I forwarded the security feed access to Agent Morales with a short message, happening now. My house. 30 minutes later, black SUVs swarmed the street. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as FBI agents marched Peterson and Kevin out in handcuffs, their faces pale in the flashing red-blue lights. My phone rang. It was Agent Morales. We got them, Mr. Briggs. On tape, discussing the entire fraud scheme. This is everything we needed. A pause. And Mr. Briggs, your wife just arrived at the scene. She's distressed. I looked down the street. Sarah was standing on our lawn, her hands over her mouth, watching as FBI agents carried boxes of documents from our house. What happens to her? I asked. That depends, Morales said. On what she knew. And on what you want. I watched Sarah for a long moment. 15 years. Good years, at the beginning, before it all curdled into this. I just want what's right, I said finally. The federal case moved quickly. Kevin and Ryan Peterson, facing a mountain of evidence, both took plea deals, implicating each other and several other conspirators in what turned out to be a 3-state operation targeting military families. Sarah's situation was more complicated. David, my lawyer, explained the full legal calculus to me over a beer a week after the arrests. They had her dead to rights on the prescription pads, Mike, he said, swirling the ice in his glass. That's a federal offense with serious time. The U.S. Attorney's Office used that as leverage. Her choice was simple: face a decade in prison for the drug fraud, or cooperate completely against Kevin and Peterson. She had to give them everything: how he planned the refinance, his connections to Peterson, everything. She had to become their star witness against the man she'd left you for. And she did. She sang, and in exchange for her testimony, the prosecutors agreed to drop the drug charges and recommend probation for her lesser role in the financial fraud. As for our personal affairs, she agreed to my terms without a fight: full restitution of the stolen funds, forfeiture of any claim to the house or my military pension, and a signed, notarized confession about the forgery. She knew how lucky she was to be avoiding a prison cell. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that first email from Bagram. No fault, but it was hardly a clean break. It was a demolition, and I was left to sort through the rubble. "Thank you," I said, the word feeling inadequate for the weight of the news. "I appreciate you letting me know. There's something else," she added, her tone shifting slightly. "We found evidence they defrauded 14 other military families. Your case broke it open. Those families might get their money back because of you." A year later, I sold the house and moved to a quiet cabin outside Bozeman, Montana. No Sarah, no betrayal, just me, my dog Scout, and a life I was finally building for myself. One evening, a Navy SEAL's wife wrote me a letter. "You don't know me, but you saved our home. Thank you for fighting back when it would have been easier to just walk away." I pinned it to my refrigerator. On the hardest days, I look at it and remember, something good came out of all the wreckage. My old life was stolen, but this one is mine. And if you want more stories of betrayal, karma, and revenge that hit just as hard, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps us bring you the next one.